Well, appreciate everybody being here and putting up with my words. You know, we studied last week about New Jerusalem, didn't we? Well, I guess this is kind of a continuation. Start out with a question. How did we, Gentiles, get into the inheritance of the Jews, which is God's world to come, the New Jerusalem? How did we inherit the New Jerusalem? Well, y'all want to read some? We'll go back to, let's read Genesis 22. I love the way the Bible goes back and ties itself together. You can read some in the New Testament, and a lot of it's in the Old Testament. Anyway, chapter 22. We're going to talk about a man called Abraham. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, or tried him, and said unto him, Abraham. And he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thy only son, Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I will tell you. So Abraham rose up early in the morning, saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son. And they got the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went to the place where God had told him. Just to insert a little bit in that, after he got there the 3rd day, so figured somewhere around 50 miles. It wasn't right at his house. Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place far off. And Abraham said to his young men, Abide here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. So Abraham took the wood of the offering and laid it on Isaac his son. So Isaac actually carried the wood. He took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they both of them together went up. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, Father. He said, Here I am, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide him a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they came to a place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. And he said, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything to him, for now I know that thou fearest God, seeing that thou hast not withheld your son, thine only son, from me. And as y'all know the story, Abraham looked up, and there was a ram caught in a thicket with his horns. In verse 15, and Abraham was called the 2nd time by God, and he said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thy only son, that in blessings I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. Thy seed shall possess the gates of his enemies. I like verse 18. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. Thy seed. talking about Jesus Christ. Got some other places I want to read, but that's the covenant that God made with Abraham. 42 generations before Christ. Some people say it's 1,700. I didn't ever quite look all that up, but I did look up where it said in the Bible it was 42 years, 42 generations before Christ. So that gives an inkling of what God done for Abraham. In verse 18, we're going to go over to Galatians 3:14. I like Galatians. It's got a lot of stuff in there. You know, we was on his mind when he was talking to Abraham. I'm so glad of that. Galatians 3, verse 14. That the blessings of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through Jesus Christ. And we might have the promise of the Spirit through faith. Brethren, I speak after the manner of men, though it be but a man's covenant, yet if it be confirmed, no man disannulleth or addeth to it. And to Abraham his seed was the promise made. He saith not, but and to seeds, as of many, but of one, and thy seed, which is Christ Jesus. He gave him the blessings of having all the people that's going to come after him. He's going to give him lands. In another place right here, it showed him he's going to give him land and all that, and all the blessings. But the one that real special to us is when he said, thy seed. The one seed that's going to come out and bless the nations and the world. If all you have to do is just accept him. And verse 18, let's look at that just for a minute. For if the inheritance be of the law, and we're not talking about the law today, that's another thing. It is no more promise, but God gave it to Abraham by promise. God gave this to Abraham, didn't he? I've studied a little bit about the law, but we'll take that up another time. I just wanted to be sure that we connect the New Jerusalem. How did we get there? Through the covenant he made with Abraham. So, as a Christian, we are sons of Abraham. Sons of Abraham. And I've heard and seen people that was a little bit standoffish with the Jews. Well, when you get to heaven, we learned there were going to be 12 gates. And that's the 12 tribes of Israel. And the 12 foundations is going to be the 12 disciples that we're studying about. The 12 ordinary men that we're talking about on Wednesday night. Anyway, I thought I'd throw that in there. Another thing, this is the place where Solomon built his temple where he took Isaac. It's close to that vicinity where he built the temple. God does everything in order, don't he? He's got a plan, and he works it out. Even though it was, I have no idea how many, 42 generations till Christ, and then till now. That's a long time. But he had us on his mind, and he let every one of us have a chance, didn't he? To see the New Jerusalem, which is our inheritance. Don't forget that word, inheritance. And I did find out it was about 50 miles to where he traveled those 3 days. I'm so glad that he gave the ram instead of Isaac, aren't you? Kind of a symbol. Well, it is a symbol of God giving his only son. Only he didn't take him down off the altar, did he? God's son was crucified. I got one other thing I was going to read in Genesis. Let me find it, 22. Okay, let's go to one thing I wanted to read was Galatians 3. Let's read 26 through 29. We're building on the idea of the seed that was to come, which was Jesus Christ, so we could get an inheritance, so we could go to the New Jerusalem, last week's study. For we all, the children of God by faith in Jesus Christ, for as many of you has been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. And Brother Rip always liked to read this verse, and he probably knew it by heart. There's neither Jew nor Greek, there's neither bond nor free, there's neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you be Christ, belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. Isn't that neat how God ties the Bible here back to Abraham, the journey he made and put Isaac on the altar and all that. It ties it back to here. We are his seed. We Abraham's seed. I'm glad to be Abraham's seed, aren't you? So anyway, I got a few more places I want to read, and if y'all notice, most time I try not to put my own thinking in it. I try to make sure it lines up in the Bible, everything. I'm not as confident as a preacher, but if I find something in the Bible, I think it's okay to read it. Matthew 25. This is in a lot of things you can read here is in Revelation, so just think about it like that. And before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, verse 32, as his shepherd divided his sheep from the goats. And then he shall set the sheep on his right hand and the goats on the left. And then shall the king say unto them on his right, Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundations of the world. Isn't that neat? We got to inherit this, and it's through the faithful servant Abraham. His faith, God made a covenant with him. And from that, it went, he blessed him and said that the one seed that we're talking about here, it was Christ. Through Christ, we're all going to be able to stand on the right-hand side, ain't we, in the sheep. I'm not going to read the rest of it about the goats and all, because I want it to be an uplifting talk, you know. So anyway, there's lots of places that talks about our inheritance. That's what I want to talk about today, our inheritance. Where do we get it from? You can go back to the garden. In the garden, God had two people there, Adam and Eve. They loved one another. They loved God. Everything was going along fine. And then Satan come in, didn't he? Well, after they got kicked out of the garden, then we had to put up with all the mosquitoes right now are real bad at my house. And I think about that when I go out. I said, Adam and Eve. Well, we wouldn't have done no better. I have to say that, you know. And would have had wouldn't have had no hurt back. Kenneth's back wouldn't hurt. Marshall's knee wouldn't hurt. Nancy's leg wouldn't hurt. But all those things was brought on us through the sin of man. And but then God made a way, didn't He? He loved us. He put us here for His enjoyment. His because He loved us. He made us. He loved us. Then He made a covenant with Abraham. Thank God for the faithfulness of Abraham. Abraham was faithful to God. He loved Him. You can read more about Abraham. And I encourage you to read not just that story, but about Abraham's life. And it goes on into Isaac and then into Jacob. Read about those three men. That's what started the 12 tribes of Israel, was Jacob's sons. Anyway, and we'll get into that one day, but I love to read and figure out the things that God has put in there for us to enjoy and to understand. And why did He do that? About the covenant, He done it because He loved us. And I sure appreciate that. I mean, I think about the people that's out there that's not saved and not going to get to enjoy the kingdom of God. He got a lot for us. We studied some of that, the beautiful place that we studied about New Jerusalem, and I don't know what we'll be doing there. I don't understand a lot of it. I don't understand. But I think He'll have everything planned for us there'll be things for us to do. And we can always worship Him because He saved us and sent His Son, just like Abraham was willing to bring the knife down and sacrifice Isaac. God did not sacrifice Jesus. He was on the, not an altar, He was on the cross. And He hung there. And then He went in the grave and rose the third day. All that because the grave couldn't hold Him. And the love He had for us wouldn't let Him stay there. When He come out, He was the first to be resurrected, but not the last. You hear? I read that and it says He was the first, but not the last. And that's what I want to get across, was that we have inheritance because God loved us and gave us His Son to accept Him if you want to, or you don't have to, whatever. But the people that's not accepting this free offer, it's a free offer. It's nothing. You can't do nothing to pay for this. We could never pay for nothing. We couldn't pay for one sin, but Christ's blood paid that. And some people will not take that. And part of it is our job to be a witness all kind of ways. Sometimes people are looking at you. The world's watching us. And the world is out there. And they're lost. And they're watching how you live, how you do at home, how you do when you go in the line at Walmart. How, do you talk ugly to the person checking you out, or whatever? If you fuss at the people when you go get your car oil change, whatever you do it in life, it's how you treat your wife. Everything is all comes down to that is a picture of witnessing out there in the world in our daily walk. It's not going out there and just sometimes just visiting people and talking to them about the Lord, which there's nothing wrong with that either. But when you see somebody and they fix to go, you say, God bless you, or something like that. Me and Tina has quit saying, good luck. We don't say that anymore, do we? But anyway, because I have tried, I talked to Don Booth, and he said he has took look completely out of his vocabulary. He said, I don't use it no more. I've done that years ago, and I've quit that. For years now, I've not used look. So I'm gonna try to do that. It's kind of a chore to keep your mind on what you're doing. But anyway, and I may not have conveyed the inheritance over like I should, but just go through the Bible and look. It's everywhere it talks about inheritance. I've had some more wrote down, but I'm gonna try one more. I messed around and wrote them down wrong. Okay, I was gonna read what it said about the generations. I don't like to say something I'll just offhand and then not show you where it's at. I read this in the Bible about the generations. This is talking about the generation in Matthew 1, verse 17. And if you want to read the generations of Christ, you can do it there, or you can go over in Luke. It's got two places in the New Bible, in the New Testament, where we can look at the generations. One of them goes all the way back to Adam in the garden. The other one just goes back maybe to Abraham. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, we'd have two places to look up the generations. Okay, let's look at this. So you can tell I was saying it right. So all the generations from Adam to David are 14. And from David until the carrying away into Babylon are 14 generations. And from the carrying away into Babylon until Christ are 14 generations. So I just multiply 3 times 14, give you 42. But anyway, that's a good thing to look up, and it's hard. I can't say the names in the generations, but it's interesting to look through it and see, and you can see a lot of people in there that you have read about in the Bible and stuff, and some of you may know all of them, but I don't. And you like this one, it starts off with generations of Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. It starts off with Abraham, and it went on down to Christ. The other one, I think it goes the other way. It backs up from Christ all the way to in Luke, I think. Anyway, y'all can look that up and see. It's interesting, and the Bible kind of ties itself together, like I was talking about, and the good things that we learn. I have thought about doing one on hell, but I don't know. That's a little bit depressing. I've been doing it on the uplifting. Y'all notice that? So I want us to think about, we don't think about nothing else today, is last week was the New Jerusalem. Today was how do we inherit it? How do we get there? I know you can say, well, I prayed down at the altar and got saved. That's how I got to be in the New Jerusalem. And that's okay too, but if you want to study it and really figure it out, go back to Genesis and read about Abraham, and you can go all the way through the Bible. If you got to study Bible, helps. It'll show you the places that the disciples talked about it, Jesus talked about it, and the prophets, some of them talked about, and all talking about the New Jerusalem. Some of them call it different things. You know, it's all not all called New Jerusalem, but may just say heaven, or, and you got all these different Bibles. Some of them say different words for different, you know, for things, and which I ain't saying bad, but anyway, today we're gonna think about the blessing God gave us through way back here at Abraham, his faithfulness, bringing that knife down. He had his hand to bring down when he was stopped. And so God counted it as righteousness. God called that righteousness. And then he's the one that made the covenant. He, out of his goodness of his God, being God, he gave us that inheritance, and it started in Genesis and went right on down to Revelations, where we read about the New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven. And I still ain't got my mind wrapped around it. The 1,500 miles high. I can say 1,500 miles square, but then it's 12 foundations. And it says it's same height that is the width and the height and breadth is all the same. So if it is, the height has to be, from what I can read and understand, is 1,500. But anyway, if we get the part of that, if we have a little tiny part of that for the rest of our eternity, the only word you can say. Thank God, not only for his generosity with Christ, but for faithful Abraham.